If you've ever dealt with an HOA, you already know the pain, but if you've ever had to face an HOA Karen who thought she could control not only her property but everyone else's lives as well, then you'll understand why I had no choice but to take a stand. And before I dive into this wild ride of revenge and sweet karmic payback, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and stick around, because stories like this will make you rethink every smug wall letter you've ever seen tucked under your doormat. It all started when I bought a little fixer-upper on the edge of a neighborhood that was run by the most controlling HOA you could imagine, a place where the board members thought of themselves as kings and queens of the block, dictating lawn lengths, mailbox colors, and even what kind of flowers people could plant. But lucky for me, my property technically wasn't part of the HOA. I was right outside their boundary lines, sitting pretty on a couple of acres with a small creek that wound through my land and provided not only a peaceful sound of running water but also a necessary stream that fed into the HOA's own little artificial pond that they loved to brag about at every meeting. And that small detail, the simple fact that my creek flowed into their water source, would eventually become the crack that shattered their smug little empire. The main antagonist of my story was a woman I came to call HOA Karen, the self-appointed ruler of the board, a middle-aged tyrant with a sharp bob haircut, oversized sunglasses, and a permanent sneer like the world owed her a prize for existing. She came marching up my driveway the first week I moved in to introduce herself, but really to inspect, criticize, and try to bully me into voluntarily complying with HOA standards even though I had zero obligation to them. She had the nerve to tell me my rustic mailbox was an eyesore and that the creek running through my yard should be landscaped properly with approved stonework, as if she had any say in what happened on my land. I laughed it off at first, but then the letters started coming, official HOA stationery mailed to me with citations and threats of fines even though, again, I wasn't even under their jurisdiction, and when I ignored those, Karen escalated, showing up in person with her little clipboard, muttering about property values and community spirit. The situation came to a head when, after a rainy season, a few tree branches and natural debris collected in the creek, and instead of minding her own business, Karen stormed over demanding I clear it immediately, because apparently the HOA pond was looking murky, and they blamed me for it. I reminded her I wasn't their member, but she hissed that if I wanted to be a good neighbor, I should comply anyway. Weeks went by with small spats, but then one morning I woke up to find heavy machinery tracks along my property and a fresh layer of gravel dumped straight into the creek, blocking the natural water flow like some makeshift dam. And it didn't take a detective to figure out who was behind it, because Karen and her cronies were out later that day, gloating in the HOA Facebook group about how the eyesore creek had finally been stabilized, thanks to their community action. I was furious. Not only had they trespassed and destroyed part of my property, but the gravel caused water to pool up and flood part of my backyard. At first I thought about calling the sheriff right away, but instead I did some digging, and that's when I realized something beautiful. By blocking my creek, they had unknowingly cut off their own main water source that fed into their precious HOA pond, and within days their decorative fountain slowed to a trickle, algae bloomed across the surface, and the HOA group chat exploded with panic over the sudden water issue. Karen tried to bluff, saying they'd contact the county, but when the county inspector came out, they traced the issue back to, you guessed it, the gravel blockage that wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. I kept my lips sealed, letting them squirm, until Karen herself marched back over demanding I restore the water flow, at my expense. That's when I unleashed the first twist. I had already taken photos of the machinery tracks, the gravel, and her little posts bragging online, and I told her if she didn't leave my property immediately I'd be handing everything over to the sheriff along with a bill for damages. Her face drained of color, but instead of apologizing she doubled down, screeching that I was endangering the community. What Karen didn't know was that I had another card up my sleeve. My grandfather had been a lawyer, and though he'd passed, he left behind shelves of legal books and contacts in the local legal scene. So with a few phone calls I had a property rights attorney not only confirming my right to sue but also salivating at the chance to slap an injunction on the HOA for trespass, destruction of property, and water rights interference. The best part, because the HOA's pond technically relied on my creek, I had legal standing to control the flow entirely as long as I wasn't deliberately polluting it, which meant I could choose whether to unblock it at all. Instead of rushing to court, I decided to play the long game, watching as the HOA scrambled. First they tried trucking in water, which was expensive. Then they tried hiring contractors to repair the pond, but every effort failed without the natural inflow. Rumors spread fast in the neighborhood. Homebuyers started backing out of contracts because the pond looked like a swamp. The board members turned on each other, and Karen's golden reputation started tarnishing as people whispered about how she had mishandled the situation. The second twist came when Karen, desperate to save face, actually tried sneaking workers back onto my property at night to shovel out the gravel, but I had already installed trail cameras, and when I caught the footage, I handed it straight to the sheriff, who happily issued trespassing citations. Now the HOA was facing not only an environmental mess but legal trouble too, and neighbors who once worshipped Karen began questioning why their dues were going toward paying her legal bills. The cherry on top was when a local news reporter, always hungry for a juicy HOA feud story, caught wind of it and ran a segment titled, HOA Water Woes, Local Board Faces Backlash Over Creek Blockage. Karen nearly combusted when she saw her smug face on TV while I got to sit back sipping coffee on my porch, watching the world learn the truth. But here's where karma really twisted the knife. That gravel they'd dumped wasn't just ordinary stone, it had mixed with runoff and formed a semi-permanent blockage, meaning the HOA would need permits and thousands of dollars in professional removal work to restore the flow, and the county wasn't about to foot the bill. So when Karen came crawling back, begging me to help for the good of the community, I simply smiled and reminded her of all those fake fines and threats she'd mailed me, then handed her an invoice for the damages they'd caused. She screamed, she threatened lawsuits, she even tried rallying the neighborhood against me, but by then everyone had seen the truth. Her power was gone, her reputation shredded, and the HOA was left floundering in debt. I, on the other hand, had the last laugh, because not only did I keep my property rights intact, but I eventually struck a deal with the county to designate the creek area as a protected habitat. Meaning no HOA board, no matter how controlling, could ever touch it again. And so, in the end, Karen's obsession with control literally dried up the very thing that gave her and her HOA their pride, their pretty pond, and their smug status. My backyard healed, the creek flowed naturally once the county ordered the gravel removed at the HOA's expense, and I enjoyed every minute of peace that followed, knowing that karma had worked its slow, grinding justice. Sometimes revenge doesn't need you to lift a finger, it just needs patience, a few trail cameras, and a Karen foolish enough to bury herself in gravel.